Warning. The program you're about to watch contains explicit language and descriptions of adult themes and graphic violence that people may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
They traveled for hours, the weight of the encounter lingering in the air. "We're almost at the border," Kaizo finally said, breaking the silence. Abigail glanced around before speaking. "Can we stop for a bit?" Kaizo nodded and pulled the reins, bringing the horse to a halt. Abigail dismounted, stretching her legs as Kaizo sat on a fallen tree resting his own. After a moment, she stepped toward him. "Kaizo?" The way she said his name made him look up immediately. There was something different in her voice, something serious. He met her gaze, giving her his full attention. Abigail hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I kissed you yesterday, did I cross a line?" Kaizo's gaze was steady, unreadable. "Yes, you did." Her chest tightened. She lowered her eyes, shame creeping in like a shadow. "You're getting married soon," he added, his voice softer now. She swallowed hard. "I know." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Then Kaizo took a slow breath. "But I wanted you to." Her head snapped up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You mean?" "Yes, I have liked you for a while now, Abigail," he admitted. A breath of relief escaped her lips as she stepped closer, her fingers trembling as they reached for his. "Kaizo, I'm scared." His hands closed around hers, firm and steady. "I understand, but the king, he will never allow this." "My father is too stubborn," she whispered. Kaizo's jaw tightened. "If he finds out, I would be executed." "No." She shook her head, gripping his hands tighter. "I won't let that happen. We'll show him our love is worth the risk." A bitter smile crossed Kaizo's lips. "You and I, we were never meant to be. Not in his world. I'm a low-class soldier. You're a princess." "Then we'll change that," she said, her voice unwavering. "I don't care about titles or duty or social status. I care about you." Kaizo searched her face, looking for hesitation, but she didn't waver. After a long pause, he exhaled. "Are you ready to fight for this?" She nodded. "Are you?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a certainty that sent shivers through her, Kaizo pulled her into his arms. "I don't understand something." Kaizo begins. "You're rich and powerful." "I'm nothing," Kaizo said, his voice low. "You can have any man you want, Abigail. I have nothing to offer you." Abigail stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Don't say that," she whispered. "You have more to offer than you realize. You're only looking at the outside. Try to see yourself the way I do." "How do you see me?" Kaizo questioned her gently. "Despite your daunting past, you didn't let it destroy you. In fact, you did the opposite. That takes courage and discipline. Someone who is true to himself, regardless of his circumstances." "I see the real you," Abigail explains. She reached for his hands. "I choose you, Kaizo, if you choose me too." He exhaled sharply, as if battling an invisible force. "I wish it were that simple." Abigail gently cupped his face, her touch warm, grounding. "If what we feel is real, it will conquer anything." Her voice firm, along with conviction in her eyes. "Kaizo, I'm falling for you." Something in him shattered. All his life, he learned to defend himself against weapons, but was not prepared to defend against other people's feelings. "If this is love, then I have no defense against it," he muttered, then swallowed hard. "I feel the same." Like a magnet, their lips met in a passionate kiss, the world around them fading. For a moment, there was only them, only the warmth, the certainty, the undeniable pull between them. Ahem. A gruff voice cut through the moment. Kaizo and Abigail broke apart, startled. Mounted on his horse, an officer loomed over them, a smirk playing on his lips. "Arthur!" Abigail shouted in surprise. "Did I interrupt something?" Arthur asked, his tone laced with amusement. Then his expression darkened. "Kaizo, you're under arrest for assaulting the princess." "No, it's not like that," Abigail protested, stepping in front of Kaizo. Arthur ignored her. "Take him." Two soldiers step forward. Kaizo gets up from his position, his eyes flicking to them, reading their movements before they even acted. When they lunged, he struck first, swift, precise. Within seconds, both men lay sprawled on the ground. Arthur clicked his tongue. "Oh, now you're resisting arrest and attacking royal guards? That's treason, Kaizo." He raised a hand. Men use necessary force. More soldiers surrounded Kaizo, moving in cautiously. In his stance, Kaizo's feet bounced a few small jumps, his hand hovering over his sword handle. The men charged in with weapons and screams, planting his feet. Kaizo reached for his own, drawing it just a few inches from its sheath. The soldiers skidded to a stop. "Oh shit," one of them breathed. A ripple of fear passed through the others. Some hesitated, others stumbled back, the weight of Kaizo's reputation settling in. Kaizo held their terrified gazes for a long moment. Then, with a slow, measured movement, he pushed his sword back into its sheath and raised his hands in surrender. Not wanting to hurt his comrades, 2 guards rushed him, forcing him to his knees. They wrenched his sword away and locked heavy iron cuffs around his wrists. Arthur smirked. "The king will hear of this." He turned to the soldiers. "Take him away." Abigail reached for Kaizo, but strong arms held her back. "No, you can't do this." But Kaizo didn't fight. He kept his gaze steady, locking eyes with her one last time before the soldiers dragged him away. Abigail screamed. "No!" Arthur seized her wrist and dragged her toward a waiting horse. "Princess, you're coming with me," he said, his grip unrelenting. He hoisted her onto the saddle and mounted his own steed before yanking the reins. Soldiers on horseback flanked them as they rode toward the castle, pushing a restrained Kaizo along with them. As they burst into the grand hall, Arthur strode forward with Abigail in tow. "Your Majesty, we found your daughter near the border, being assaulted by one of my soldiers," he declared. "No, father, that's not true." Abigail cut in desperately. The king raised a hand, silencing her. His gaze swept over her disheveled state. "You look indecent," he said, voice edged with disappointment. "Where is this soldier?" The doors swung open, and 2 guards dragged Kaizo inside. With a swift kick to the back of his knees, they forced him to kneel before the throne. The king's eyes bore into him. "The soldier who was supposed to escort my daughter, what is your name again?" Kaizo met his gaze but remained silent. Arthur stepped forward and struck him across the face. "You will answer the king." Before Kaizo could react, Abigail blurted out, "His name is Kaizo." The king's expression remained unreadable. "Did you assault my daughter?" Abigail refused to stay quiet. "No, he did not. We were declaring our love. I kissed him." A heavy silence settled over the room. The king's face darkened as he absorbed her words. "You know my daughter is to be married to the Prince of the Highlands tomorrow," he said at last. "Daddy, please, I don't want to marry him." Abigail pleaded, her voice breaking. The king's gaze flickered between them. "Do you love each other?" "Yes, I love him, father," Abigail confessed without hesitation. The king's eyes shifted to Kaizo. "I was asking him." Kaizo hesitated, his head bowed. Then, in a whisper, "Yes, I do." Arthur sneered, "You will address His Majesty properly." Kaizo lifted his chin, locking eyes with the king. His voice rang out, firm and unyielding. "Yes, I do, Your Majesty." This infuriates the king. "Hang him!" "No, no," Abigail screamed, struggling against the guards restraining her. The king remained unmoved. "Tomorrow, when the 3rd bell tolls during the wedding, you will die." Abigail's sobs filled the hall as she thrashed against her captors. "Kaizo!" The king turned away. "Take my daughter to her chambers and lock her in. Take the prisoner to his cell." As she was dragged from the throne room, Abigail fought against the soldiers, her cries echoing through the castle corridors. Kaizo was hauled away in the opposite direction, his fate sealed. That night, Abigail lay restless, her tears staining her pillow as the hours passed. Somewhere in the castle, Kaizo sat in his cell, awaiting the dawn of a day that would bring his end. The next morning, with the chaos of the previous night behind them, the castle was quiet. The king stepped into his daughter's chambers, his expression softening as he saw her standing before the mirror in her wedding dress. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia, "just like your mother used to." Abigail didn't turn to face him. She kept her gaze on her own reflection, her expression unreadable. "Father, I want to see him again," she said quietly. The warmth in the king's eyes vanished. His jaw tightened. "I forbid it," he said firmly. "You will marry the Prince of Highland. This union will bring peace." At that, Abigail finally turned to him, frustration flickering in her eyes. "I want to marry for love." The king exhaled sharply. "That's nonsense. Besides, he is not one of our kind." Abigail straightened her shoulders. "I don't care about race, I care about character, and I don't even know anything about this prince you expect me to marry." The king hesitated. For a moment, it seemed as though he might soften, but then he squared his stance. "The decision has been made." The king shouted firmly, "If I refuse this proposal, it will ruin my reputation and possibly spark a war." The king explained. Abigail drew in a breath, choosing her words carefully. "If you let me see him one last time, I will do as you ask. I will marry your prince." The king studied her, his expression softened. Then, with a reluctant sigh, he nodded. 5 minutes. That's all you get." A small, grateful smile touched Abigail's lips. "Thank you, father." The king turned to one of the guards at the door. "Escort her to the prisoner. She has 5 minutes, no more." "Yes, your majesty," the guard said with a bow. Moments later, Abigail was led down the dim stone corridors of the castle's dungeon. When the heavy iron door creaked open, her heart clenched. Kaizo sat on the cold floor, his back chained to a post, his face turned away from the entrance. She took a shaky breath and stepped inside. Abigail drops to her knees, her breath trembling. "Oh, Kaizo," she whispers. At the sound of her voice, Kaizo slowly opens his eyes. He looks up at her in defeat, but smiling. "You look even more beautiful than I could ever dream of," he said firmly. "No, I look like a royal slave," Abigail said with sarcasm. She tried to lighten the mood, but her expression says otherwise. Kaizo forces a smile. Abigail stares at him for a moment, then turns her gaze onto the chains that bind him. She presses her lips together, struggling to hold back her tears. She tried to be strong. "You shouldn't be here," Kaizo said, his voice barely above a whisper. Abigail's eyes focus back to his face. "I had to see you," she says, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Kaizo shakes his head slightly. "I'm not." His gaze softens. "I got to love you once, and that's enough for me to die for." The words stab deep. Abigail can no longer stay strong. Tears slip down Abigail's cheeks. "Don't cry," Kaizo says gently. "It's your wedding day." That only makes her sob harder. She leans in, placing a trembling hand behind his head, pulling him close until their foreheads touch. Between her sobs, she manages to whisper, "I love you." He paused, letting the words tear into his heart. Kaizo swallows hard, his body tense with the effort to stay composed. Kaizo tried to ease the pain. "I'm a slave, and you're a princess," he says, his voice low, resigned. "It's not written in the stars for us." His eyes flicker with sorrow. "Forget about me, okay?" Abigail's grip tightens on his face, forcing him to look at her. Her tear-streaked eyes burn with determination. "I will never forget you." Kaizo's breath catches. He looks away, blinking rapidly, his jaw clenching as he fights back his own tears. "Time's up, princess," a soldier calls out. Abigail inhales sharply. Slowly, she stands. As her hand slides past Kaizo's lips, he presses a soft kiss against her palm. She closes her fingers over it, clutching the kiss to her heart as she turns away. The heavy door creaks shut behind her. Kaizo exhales shakily, his head tilting down. He shuts his eyes, and finally, he lets his tears fall. For the first time, tears hurt more than bleeding. After a brief moment, "Get the prisoner out." Arthur's voice cuts through the silence. The first toll of the town clock echoed through the square. The crowd gathered around the wooden platform at the center, where Kaizo stood with a rope tight around his neck, his hands bound behind him. His crime, assaulting Princess Abigail. His fate, death by hanging. Ordered by the king. Arthur shouted out to the spectators. At the Grand Cathedral, Abigail stepped forward in her wedding dress, the weight of expectation pressing down on her. The second bell rang, its chime reverberating through the town. Her heart pounded as she turned towards the sound. Her breath quickened. She looked at the prince waiting at the altar, then at the soldier standing nearby, his dagger gleaming at his side. Without hesitation, Abigail seized the blade, remembering the tactic that Kaizo used on her for better lateral movement. Gasps filled the cathedral as she slashed the fabric of her gown, tearing it at the hem. The bouquet tumbled from her hands as she bolted toward the town center, gripping the dagger tightly. Abigail bolts towards the center of town with her speed. Her heart races as fast as her legs, hoping it's not too late. Guests rose in confusion. The king, the mom, and the Prince of Highland exchanged stunned glances before chasing after her. At the execution site, Arthur, the town magistrate, stood beside Kaizo. "When the bell tolls a third time, I will pass judgment," he declared. His voice carried through the hushed crowd. "Do you have any last words?" Before Kaizo could speak, a voice rang out. "Stop!" Abigail burst through the crowd, shoving the executioner aside. "Princess?" Arthur's expression darkened in disbelief. "Abigail!" Kaizo gasped. Arthur took a step forward. "What are you doing here?" Abigail raised the dagger to her own throat. "If you try to stop me, I will end my life," she said, her voice steady. "And you will have to explain that to the king." Arthur stops in his tracks. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then the crowd parted, making way for the king and the mom. "What is the meaning of this?" the mom demanded. "I won't marry for duty. I will marry for love," Abigail declared. "I love this man, Mom." Her voice breaking. A stunned silence fell over the square. Then, slowly, a smile curved the mom's lips. The Prince of Highland stepped onto the platform. His expression was unreadable. "So this is how it is," he said. "You rather marry a slave than a prince?" The prince questioned. Abigail snapped back. "This low life is worth more than your royal status." The prince stunned. Abigail lifted her chin. "I will not die for you," she said, her voice unwavering, "but I will die for him." The prince narrowed his eyes. Let's put that to the test." Without warning, he snatched a soldier's sword and swung at Kaizo. Abigail screamed, throwing herself in front of him, but Kaizo moved faster, twisting Abigail away as the blade sliced across his back. A cry of pain escaped him. Blood seeped through his torn shirt. The crowd erupted. He tried to strike the princess. Someone shouted in the crowd. Abigail trembled as she removed the noose from Kaizo's neck, lowering him gently to the ground. The king stepped forward, glaring at the prince. "Do you know what this means?" The prince scowled, wiping his blade. "I don't want your daughter anyway," he sneered. The king grabbed the sword from him. "Then tell your father, we are at war," the king declared. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd as the prince turned on his heel, storming away with his men. The king turned to Kaizo, who knelt before him, breathless and bleeding. "You just cost me a war," the king muttered. Abigail tightened her hold on Kaizo. "Are we canceling the wedding?" Arthur asked hesitantly. The king exhaled. Then his gaze softened as he looked at Kaizo. "No, this man is my son-in-law. Any man willing to die for my daughter is worthy of the title." Abigail gasped, tears filling her eyes. She turned to Kaizo with a wide smile. "Did you hear that? I'm your wife!" Kaizo, still weak from the wound, let out a soft chuckle. "I do," he murmured. "I do too," Abigail whispered. And as they sealed their love with a kiss, the crowd erupted in cheers, marking not just a wedding but the beginning of a new fate. In the weeks that follow, the grand hall was silent except for the flickering of torches lining the stone walls. At the head of the long table sat the king, his expression heavy with the weight of war. Seated around him were Kaizo, Abigail, Arthur, and 5 elders, each bearing their own thoughts on the dire situation at hand. "The northern border is going to be under attack," the king announced, his voice steady but grave. "What do we propose?" Arthur leaned forward. "We should defend with full force, hold the line, and then push into enemy territory. If we strike hard enough, we can weaken them from within." Abigail shook her head. "Our priority should be defending the gate and our people. We have no interest in invading their lands." Kaizo folded his arms, his gaze sharp. "We defend our border, but when the opportunity presents itself, we retaliate, not to conquer, but to ensure they don't threaten us again." One of the elders, an older man with a graying beard, tapped his fingers against the table. "Do we desire their resources?" The king exhaled, considering. "More resources would strengthen our kingdom." Abigail frowned. "We have enough wealth. There's no need for greed." Arthur shrugged. "More wouldn't hurt." Kaizo's tone was firm. "We are not fighting this war for power or resources. We fight to end the tensions between us and the Highlands. My only goal is peace." Abigail turned to Kaizo, her expression softening. The elders exchanged glances and nodded in agreement. The king looked around the room. "Then we shall vote." One by one, they cast their decisions. 4 sided with the king. 5, including Abigail, sided with Kaizo. "Then it's settled," the king declared. "We follow Kaizo's strategy." Arthur spoke up. "Who will lead the fight?" Kaizo met his gaze without hesitation. I will. The king's brow furrowed. It would be wise for the future king to remain behind the safety of these walls. No, Kaizo said firmly. I will not sit in safety while my people bleed for this kingdom. This war is my responsibility. Abigail straightened. Mine too. I will fight alongside you. The king sighed but gave a slow nod. Then it is decided. The meeting adjourned, and as the others departed, Kaizo and Abigail walked together through the dimly lit corridors. I can tell you're worried, Kaizo murmured. Abigail glanced at him. How could I not be? Don't be, he reassured her. I've fought battles before. This time, I fight for us. She held his gaze, her heart heavy yet comforted by his resolve. I know, but that doesn't make it easier. Kaizo reached for her, cupping her face gently. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to take in his warmth. Then he kissed her cheek, a silent promise lingering between them. A firm knock echoed through the wooden door. Kaizo turned the handle and pulled it open. You are needed in the armory, Your Highness, Arthur said. Kaizo sighed. Arthur, that sounds strange coming from you. Just call me Kaizo. As you wish, Arthur replied with a faint smile. They walked side by side down the dimly lit corridor, the weight of the coming battle hanging between them. Funny how fate works, Arthur mused. You were once my soldier, now you're my prince. Kaizo chuckled. Just because I'm your prince doesn't mean I'll disrespect you. In fact, I owe you. You taught me the basics of combat. You had a natural talent for fighting, Arthur admitted. After the first year, there was nothing more I could teach you. They reached the armory, where steel glistened under torchlight. After gearing up, they stepped outside to a sight both humbling and overwhelming. Thousands of soldiers standing at attention, awaiting their leader. This is your army, Arthur said. Kaizo took a deep breath. He could see the doubt in some of their eyes. He stepped forward. Some of you may wonder, why must we fight for a king? His voice rang across the field. I tell you now, this is not a war for royalty. This is a war to protect our families, our homes, our future. I cannot promise that all of us will return, but we do not fight for power, for riches, or for land. We fight for peace, and as the Prince of the Lowlands, I will fight beside you. A thunderous cheer erupted. Kaizo turned to Arthur. I want you to take part of our army to guard the main castle. If this attack on the northern border is just a diversion, we must be prepared for infiltration. Arthur nodded. Understood. He signaled a division of soldiers and led them toward the castle. Kaizo turned back to his remaining men. We march. The march was long, but when they arrived at the northern border, Kaizo lifted a hand. Hold your ground. This is where we make our stand. End of part 4, to be continued.